everyone, Timber here. I am so happy to be participating in the 6th annual March Caprice. This is my third time entering, and I want to thank everyone involved with making this amazing event a reality. You guys are seriously the best. Now that I've said my thanks, on to your regularly scheduled content. Has anyone seen those little book nooks that you sandwich between the books on your bookshelf? I always thought they were super fun. Well, one day I was at my local craft store and I saw a little DIY book nook kit that only came with the walls, so the possibilities of what to put inside the nook were endless. I ended up grabbing one that day and then I put it in my closet and forgot about it for 3 years. Well, this past Christmas, my uncle actually got me a different book nook kit. I've included it here because it's really cool and even lights up. While I was building it, I remembered that I had that other DIY kit in my closet. I decided that I really needed to do something with it. And with March Caprice right around the corner, what better than to make a Kingdom Hearts themed one? From the start, I knew I wanted my book nook to be cozy and nostalgic. So what better world to turn into a book nook than Traverse Town? Since I would love to live there if it didn't mean that my own world fell to darkness. I used the website NoClip to explore each of the districts, and I settled on District 2 as my focus, with its little shops, details that would look cool downsized, and just its nice vibe, despite a citizen getting their heart stolen being one of the first times you actually see the place. I decided to use the view looking towards the door to District 1 as my focal point, as I liked the shops lining each side, and I also liked the fountain where you fight opposite armor for the first time. Also, some quick housekeeping. Throughout this video, I'll be referring to this portion of the build as the raised walkway, and the walls that have the little shops as the side walls. I'll also refer to these littler walls as the hallway walls. I just wanted to make sure you understand me, so it doesn't sound like I'm speaking gibberish. Without further ado, let's get this project started. I started by painting the wooden pieces with acrylic paint, black on the outside and a blue-gray on the inside, as most of the stone and brick walls, cobblestone paths were this color. It was also light enough that I knew I could layer paint on top without it showing through. Next, I started designing. I traced each wooden piece onto some cardstock so I could see what the dimensions of the book nook would look like, and then I sketched out where I wanted the various shops to be, including the layout of the raised walkway and the stairs that led down to the fountain. Now I bet you're wondering how I'll make the raised walkways and the other pieces. At first, I thought I'd use clay, but then I had a feeling that it would be too heavy. Instead, I remember seeing people make miniature buildings using these balsam boards, so I ordered a pack of those to use. I cut out the pieces I drew onto some cardstock and then taped them onto the balsam boards and cut them out with a box cutter. I didn't film this bit because I wanted to actually focus on the cutting and not worry about whether my hands were placed properly for people to see and then accidentally cutting my hands. Safety first, people. And here are the pieces all cut out. Next order of business was to attach them together. I secured everything in place temporarily with some painter's tape. And then went in with some hot glue to attach them permanently. I finished the raised walkway and the hallway walls, but I didn't attach the two together yet because I figured they'd be easier to paint separately. So, did you catch the various mistakes I made earlier? Because at the time, I did not. When I made my initial plans, I forgot one thing and I messed up another. First thing, I didn't take into account how high the raised walkway would be off the ground. This was easily fixed when I transferred the template onto the sidewalls, as all I had to do was shift everything up by 1.5 inches. The second thing I did was I used the outside dimensions of the book nook when I made the raised walkway and the two side walls. This actually resulted in both of those pieces being too wide and too tall by 2/16 of an inch. So I actually had to go and shave those pieces down off camera when I figured it out. While doing that, I made damn sure that everything else was the right size. After that little hiccup, I started to paint some backgrounds on the wooden pieces, starting with the bottom. I used a few different shades of gray to make a bunch of little non-uniform circles on the bottom to mimic a cobblestone pattern. It was really a trust the process kind of thing because at one point it didn't look good, but in the end, it actually turned out okay. I moved on to the side walls next. I used my template and I traced out where everything was going to go. You can't really see it through the camera because I used a 6H pencil to avoid the marks showing through the paint. At this point, I wasn't quite sure exactly what I was going to be painting in terms of the background on those side walls. The only thing I knew that I was going to be painting for sure were the little roofs that you would see behind the main shop buildings, like in the hallway that leads to District 3. First, I put a reddish-brown color down as the base. I lightened this color using white and then proceeded to paint on hundreds of small, tiny interlocking shingles. This is another thing that I didn't end up filming because do you really want to see me paint shingles for 3 hours? Because really, I had to wait for each row to dry in between painting the next row, which made the process really tedious. Instead, please enjoy a clip of my rabbit eating some romaine lettuce. His name is Angel, he's about 6 years old, and he is the sweetest boy in the world. After never wanting to paint another shingle again, I also extended the darker red-brown color from earlier further down because I wasn't quite sure how I was going to tackle that part of the roof later. Then I switched to prepping the raised walkways with gesso and painting the top of it with the same cobblestone pattern as before. I also went ahead and painted part of the hallway walls a brown color, specifically the portion perpendicular to the door to District 1. In that time, I also realized I forgot to paint in some of the little windows where the shingles are, so I painted those in. I decided to do the back wall next, because I knew there wasn't too much that needed to be done to it since a large portion is covered up by the hallway walls. I marked out where the door was going to go in black, and then I started to paint on a bunch of bricks. It actually ended up being less work than painting those shingles. With all the jumping around working on different portions of this project, I feel like I have the attention span of a rodent. Rodents are different than my rabbit, by the way. Rodents, like mice, chipmunks, and squirrels, are part of the order Rodentia, while rabbits make up the order Legomorpha. Though similar, legomorphs actually have a second pair of peg-like front incisors, while rodents only have one pair. This animal fact has been brought to you by someone who works in the field of biology and ecology. Anyways, what was I saying about having a bad attention span? Oh, yes, I honestly don't know why I kept jumping all over the place in terms of what I was working on, but the next thing I did was prepare the rest of the hallway walls for painting and then painting the top of the book nook to look like the night sky. I finished off the night sky by painting on some white stars using a paintbrush, and then also trying to use watered down white paint and kind of flicking it on. After that, I went back to those hallway walls again and realized that I was about to have to paint a boatload more shingles and now some bricks. That was another 3 hours of my life I will never get back. From there, I figured I'd make the door to District 1 stand out a little more. My first idea was cutting a piece of balsam board to act as the door, and then cutting out some foam to act as the bricks around it. I painted the bricks gray and used some marker to outline them. I realized that using both the balsam board and the foam would be a little too bulky, so I ended up abandoning the wood and just glued on the foam. I moved back over to the side walls and I decided that I wanted them to be a little bit more 3D. Using the cardstock from before, I cut out more pieces of balsam board that would stack on top of each other to give more definition to the buildings. I also primed them with gesso. I took a break from filming for a couple of days to solidify some ideas for the walls. I really didn't want to individually paint hundreds of bricks, so I went looking for a way to circumvent this. To start, I found some thin foam pieces with adhesive backing that were perfect. I cut out the pieces I needed for the two side walls and the raised walkway. So here is where some cheating comes in. I have this little etching tool that I got as a Christmas present last year, and I tested it out to see if it worked on the foam. It did, as long as I didn't add too much pressure. With it, I was able to etch out all the details I wanted, including the brick and stone patterns. After priming my pieces, instead of trying to paint a bunch of gray straight lines into the grooves I etched out, I watered down some gray paint and kind of just glooped it on. I let the paint sit for a bit and then sopped up the excess with a paper towel. Then, all I had to do was dry brush the other color on, which wouldn't get into the grooves. This cut down on a lot of brick painting time. While doing that, I also went ahead and painted the rest of the foam pieces. Here's how they turned out. Before sticking them in place, I decided to glue the balsam boards to the side walls first because I knew I'd have to clamp them down while they dried, and I didn't want to mess up the foam. I only had 2 clamps, so I had to wait a while to get all the pieces glued together. While waiting for the glue to dry, I started to work on the little railway that runs around the raised walkway. I used a thicker piece of foam and I cut out the pieces I needed. I also textured them using that same etching tool. I decided to glue them together before painting to make sure they fit properly. I was not going to waste my time repainting a piece to replace one that was cut wrong. In that time, the glue had dried, so I stuck the foam pieces onto the side walls and the raised walkway. Then I went back to painting the railing. Once done, I glued it to the platform with some regular white glue. I also made some little light fixture embellishments using a combination of foam and polymer clay and attached those as well. I bet by now you're wondering how I was going to tackle the staircase. I ended up using some more thin foam that I painted and drew kind of a staircase pattern on with a marker. I glued it in off-screen as it ended up being a little more difficult than I thought. I also made some more brick walls with foam that I planned to glue on at the end, as it would make installing the raised walkway into the book nook harder. This was the point where most of the project was complete, minus some little details I wanted to add. On one of the side walls, this included drawing some details onto the windows, adding the parts of the handbag store that protrudes from the wall, and adding our lovely Mad Hatter suits and dresses sign. I also painted some toothpicks that I cut to size and used as little pillars holding those parts of the shops up. On the other side, this included putting on the gray siding pieces. I did this by cutting out strips of cardstock and stacking a couple of pieces on top of each other and then painting them gray. I also made some thinner pieces that I colored with a brown marker to make into little wood beams, and those little blue windows that jut out from the wall using more foam. Lastly, I used one final piece of cardstock to make a little roof for the pointy building. I used more cardstock to make some additional wall sidings, some doors, and the boots and shoes store sign. With all that done, it was time to assemble the Nook. I also didn't film this bit, as boy did these pieces not want to go together easily. I ended up using this rubber mallet, which made my camera look like it captured an earthquake. I attached one of the side walls and the back walls to the bottom piece, and then I put in the raised walkway. With those in place, there was one last thing I wanted to install before completing the book nook: the fountain that contains the world's keyhole. I made the part of the structure that contains the keyhole using balsam boards and more of that thin adhesive foam. I also used more foam to make the semicircular brick portion. After that, I installed the hallway walls using some hot glue, and then attached the last side wall and the top bit. Here is the result. It's a bit dark on the inside, as I didn't really have any fairy lights or anything to keep it lit up inside. I think later down the line I'll see about getting a little reading light and glue it to the top. But for now, let's test this baby out. Here's an embarrassing confession. Though I now have 2 book nooks, I don't actually own a bookshelf. The closest thing I have are these wooden crates that my grandfather made me that I store books in, so I put it in there. And here it is, serving its function. This was such a blast to make, and I hope I've inspired you to try and make something similar. Again, happy March Caprice everyone, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the festivities.